another minute maybe. Okay, that's fine.
We'll edit the video.
Sure. Yeah, we'll give it a couple minutes, several minutes as people log in. And just a side note, we did have a number of folks indicate that they were not able to make it, so they certainly wanted to know about the recordings availability. And for those just joining us, we'll give it another couple minutes or so as people log in. Unfortunately, I don't have any interesting music as we're waiting for people. So I know some other organizations do that. They're a little more sophisticated in their audiovisual and IT. Sam, do you think I should get us started?
Yeah, I'll keep letting people in as they join. It looks like it's a slow trickle today.
Okay. Maybe I will start since the preliminaries are the preliminaries and the main show will begin in a few minutes. So thank you for joining us. Welcome to today's forum. We are fortunate today to have representatives from two leading companies in the area of industrial heat electrification. We will have Arun Gupta, founder and CEO of Skyven Technologies, who will speak about his company's leading work on steam generating heat pumps. And then he will be followed by Carolyn Joe of Rondo Energy. Rondo is a leader in the growing area of thermal batteries that create and store heat for industrial processes. Rondo, along with a number of other firms, and I do feel compelled to mention a few of them like Antora Energy and Brenmiller Energy and others, are leading the charge not only for industrial electrified heat, but also for storage and for thermal batteries that can support the electrical grid. And I think Arun will also be mentioning some of the grid flexibility associated with the heat pumps that they've developed. Before transitioning to our presenters, I do want to provide a few words on logistics. Next slide, please. And then a bit on the NASEO Industrial Working Group. There are a few new names among the participants. So please mute when not speaking. It's a small group. We will have a Q&A and update portion later on. So when you can use the Q&A box or chat. And also we'll be able to have verbal comments as well. The slides and postings, the recording will be posted. And also I do want to recognize Sam Kramer, who's behind the scenes making this all work. and thank him for his support, and also support from the Industrial Efficiency and Decarbonization Office at DOE, which is financially and otherwise supporting this work. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about this for some of the new folks. The Industrial Working Group is working with state energy offices and others to identify, develop, and enhance resources to advance clean manufacturing and industry. A lot of what we've been doing has been to try to increase cooperation and coordination across technical and business assistance programs, and to work with economic development, technical assistance agencies, and others to advance industrial productivity and environmental responsibility, emissions reduction, as well as energy reliability and resilience objectives. Thus, some of the emphasis today on grid services. We're interested both in existing industries as well as new industries and technologies. And again, many thanks to DOE for its support. Next slide, please. We have 17 states participating in the working group. These are state energy offices, but also technical assistance programs and economic development agencies and bodies, some of whom I see among our participants. Thank you for joining us. Next, please. So just a very short review. We provide web resources and periodic email updates on technical and business assistance programs, on funding opportunities, reports, studies, events, both our own as well as those of other organizations. I won't read through them, but among the recent items on our webpage, and those of you in the working group who are getting our emails will have seen recent DOE offering for half dozen states on retooling the auto industry for EVs. They will be developing a small supplier EV transition playbook, which should be of interest to some of your auto parts manufacturers and that supply chain. A number of other recent funding opportunities. We also highlight other reports, such as Renewable Thermal Collaborative's Chemical Sector Assessment. Clean Air Task Force has a really nice federal funding guide for states. And just to highlight that we did respond to a DOE request for information on transforming industry, which is posted, and I can provide for anyone who's interested in that. Next, please. So won't read through all of those, but we had our last forum back in June. Some of you from the Midwest region may have joined us at the NASEO Midwest Regional Meeting, which also included a field trip to Trane Technologies that was very interesting. And I'll just move on to some candidates for future forum topics. DOE is developing a vision study, Pathways for U.S. Industrial Transformations. We may try to do that. The Manufacturing USA Institutes, that is a possibility as well. The Smart Manufacturing Leadership Program selections, that actually occurred a while back, but that is a potential topic, as well as the Regional Smart Manufacturing Pilot Initiative. And there are a few other opportunities. The industrial assessment centers are actually in the process of being rebranded a bit, and their programs are expanding and including more robust workforce roles. So we may revisit our work with the IACs. Plus, we always welcome state focus features and your news. So I think with that, I think that's my last slide. Maybe you can move to the next. I guess that is. So with that, let's move to Arun. I think you can share your slides.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Arun Gupta, and I'm the founder and CEO at Skyven Technologies. I'll just share my screen here. Okay, so we at Skyven Technologies are working to decarbonize industrial manufacturing with a proprietary steam generating heat pump. And I always start every presentation with a fact. That's 20% of global carbon emissions are caused by industrial heat. That's about as much climate impact as all of transportation. That's all the cars, trains, planes, boats, everything combined. It's enormous. And of that, half of industrial heat is steam. So steam is an enormous piece of the puzzle. It's a big opportunity, and it's a big opportunity because, hold on a second, I just need to make sure I'm sharing the right. Give me one sec here. Okay, yep. Sorry about that. I just sometimes I have multiple presentations that I give. Don't want to give you the wrong presentation. You start seeing my financial numbers, you're like, oh no, that's not the right one. Okay, so it's a big opportunity here because manufacturers are committed to decreasing emissions kind of across industries, but almost all of their steam comes from fuel-fired boilers. Fuel-fired boilers are a technology from 1867, 150-year-old technology. They're still around because they have been the most cost-effective way to produce steam. Alternatives like electric boilers have existed for a long, long time, but they are far too expensive. And then existing heat pumps simply don't reach high enough temperatures to produce steam, at the useful temperatures and pressures needed for manufacturing. And so, what we do here at Skyven is we are an energy as a service company, and we're pioneering a proprietary steam generating heat pump technology that delivers clean process steam, so emissions-free steam to industrial facilities at prices lower than natural gas. The way we do that, our steam generating heat pump is called Arcturus. This system electrifies steam production, so it consumes electricity rather than natural gas. And in doing so, produces the deep decarbonization that is needed to decarbonize industrial steam. The other thing that's really needed to achieve market adoption is cost savings. Industrial manufacturers love to save money. We all do. And so this system actually produces steam at an all-in price that is lower than natural gas boilers. And the reason it's able to do that, this has very high coefficients of performance, or COP, that counteracts the difference between electricity and natural gas prices. So we all know that gas is cheaper than electricity. But this system is so efficient that it consumes very little electricity compared to the natural gas that a boiler would consume. And in doing so, actually achieves a lower cost point than natural gas boilers. Other notes here is that it's able to overcome the limitations of existing heat pumps in that it produces steam at temperatures up to 420 Fahrenheit and pressures up to 300 pounds. So it's able to address the steam needs of major manufacturers across industries such as chemicals, pulp and paper, and food and beverage. And as I mentioned, achieves a deep decarbonization. So we see an average of 57% reduction in facility level emissions across the sites that we work with. So I mentioned a little bit about super high coefficient of performance. This is a chart that kind of demonstrates or shows coefficient of performance is really a function of the temperature of the heat available and also the pressure of the steam. And our coefficient of performance can go as high as 8, which is exceptionally high for under the right conditions, and is generally, in the 3-ish range. So a little bit more about the technology. Hopefully you find this interesting. So this heat pump, the Skyven Arcturus heat pump, is an external bolt-on retrofit that is installed outside the facility on the ground, away from the facility, generally in a field or some open space, within the facility grounds, that where it's out of the way, right? Generally a low traffic area, like the far side of the parking lot, like area that you like forget is even part of the plant. And in doing so, we're able to install this system with little to no interruption of the plant's existing operations, which is super important in manufacturing. They got to maintain high uptime and cannot.
Bueno,
They're generally not okay with bringing the plant down or disrupting operations. So we install a no downtime. This is a packaged modular system. And so another thing about this is that oftentimes in industrial, a lot of the industrial efficiency and industrial energy projects end up being bespoke projects that are specific to a given site. That's kind of been the status quo in industrial energy and industrial energy efficiency. That makes these systems really hard to scale. And the reason why you might see some plant have some efficiency measure here, but not over there, not in the plant next door. It's just all very custom. And so what we've really worked hard to do is simplify the integration with a plant and make it modular bolt-on add-on so that the same technology and the same system can decarbonize a paper plant, can decarbonize a food plant. Maybe they're making beverages, or decarbonize a chemicals plant, for example. So speaking of those industries, this is a bit of an eye chart, so apologies for that. But what we wanted to do was show some examples with numbers across pulp and paper, food and beverage, ethanol, and chemicals of how much natural gas can be saved, fuel use reduction, amount of CO2 saved, and amount of facility savings, right? Because the incredible thing that this technology and these projects do is produce substantial reductions in emissions and meaningful cost savings at the same time. So we're talking about, a couple $100,000, upwards of $1 million a year in all-in net cost savings, plus tens to up to 100,000 metric tons of CO2 reductions annually, which is pretty enormous. So kind of digging into how we do that in a little bit more detail. First, I kind of want to highlight a big opportunity, and that opportunity is related to federal funding under the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. So Skyven has been selected to receive a $145 million award under the IRA to fund a portfolio of projects. It'll be approximately 10 projects that will be funded under this funding across multiple states, multiple industries, and multiple companies in order to reduce emissions and really show emissions reductions in a cross-cutting way across industries, as well as benefit communities by improving air quality and creating local jobs. And so some key metrics here that we're highlighting at the bottom: this portfolio that will be supported by this federal funding reduce total emissions by about 400,000 metric tons, create several hundred good-paying jobs, and benefit about 330,000 people through improved air quality. Reducing emissions on site means that the community has cleaner air to breathe. And 90% of these sites are located in disadvantaged communities where we can benefit people that have the most to gain and benefit from. We have a unique deployment method where we offer a lot of optionality. And so one thing that we offer that manufacturers tend to like is an energy as a service model where we provide the capital. So we install the system, we finance the system, we own and operate it. We secure electricity contracts for it, and we share the savings that are generated by the system with the manufacturing facility. So the more the manufacturing facility saves, the more money we make. It creates a very nice alignment of incentives, and vice versa. And so that's an attractive model. We also offer a tolling model, which is more standard in the energy industry. It's related to fixed fees and pass-throughs of electricity costs. And then we also offer the traditional CapEx approach, where if customers just want to buy this and say, hey, we want to buy it for cash and own it, and we're able to support that as well. Under the energy as a service model, so that tends to be the most interesting. So the way this works is that half of the capital tends to be provided by us under financing that we provide on our balance sheet, as well as financing that we secure for the project from third parties. And then the other half is supported by grants and incentives, for example, by that $145 million award. And this one's there's a lot going on here, but what this does is kind of describe how we share the savings. So it kind of says like, hey, look, we total up the actual economic benefits that are really generated. So not stuff that's like theoretical calculated. We use meters to measure how much economic benefit is generated every month through the manufacturing facility. And then we figure out what are the real costs associated with the system, how much money is saved, so how much more benefit is there than cost, and then we share those savings. So another opportunity that I really want to highlight here is the benefits to the grid. So we are able to operate the heat pump in a grid flexible manner, which creates a substantially sized flexible load for the grid, and that entails several grid benefits, which relates to general public benefits. And so the way that works is we install this system, kind of going back up to this slide. We install the heat pump as a bolt-on add-on to the existing facility, meaning we do not replace the existing boiler. The existing boiler stays in place. We install our system in parallel or in tandem with the boiler. So the opportunity that lends itself to, in addition to making it, allowing us to be able to install the system with no downtime, the other benefit is that we offer fuel diversity to the manufacturer. So the manufacturer is now able to produce steam with electricity or natural gas, whatever makes more sense at any given time. And that's especially relevant to the grid, because as the grid gets super congested, and it's 5 p.m. on a hot summer day and everyone's coming on and turning on the ACs and cooking dinner and such, the grid gets real backed up and congested. And like, as a result, you got to turn on these dirty peaker plants that are burning oil and such. Skyven has the ability to turn our heat pump off and immediately remove several megawatts of load off of the grid, helping alleviate grid congestion. And then the other thing that does is allow for deeper penetration of renewable energy onto the grid, because as we all know, renewables are intermittent. They're not always producing, and that creates a challenge for managing the reliability of the grid. And so whenever there is essentially a shortage of electricity available on the grid, Skyven can turn our heat pump off and revert back to existing natural gas boilers and help alleviate those issues. So a note about how we do that. One of the ways we do that is we use price as a signal. So we look at the real-time electric rates where wholesale electric rates are available. And then we switch the heat pump on or off depending on whether the wholesale electric rate is above or below a switching threshold. So when the grid gets backed up, electric rates go up, the real-time electric rates go up, and we turn the heat pump off. So this is actual data. I believe this is from the state of New York over a couple of months, and each one of these spikes is a day. The top of the spike tends to be around 5 p.m. So a little more detail, kind of what I described here. When you've got sort of the peaking loads where we have dirty fossil fuels in demand, we turn the heat pump off to kind of cut out. So it's essentially peak shaving, cut off these peaks, and that produces deeper penetration of renewables and better use of existing grid infrastructure. So this is just a bit of a summary here of what we talked about. So we got cutting edge tech, attractive financials, including a model that allows us to deploy this with no capital outlay to manufacturing customers. And we do it with no impact to operations. And it provides substantial public benefits, including decarbonization, clean air, and deeper penetration of renewables on the grid and greater grid reliability. Yeah, okay. So I think that's the end of my presentation. Are we doing questions at the end after Carolyn's presentation?
Generally, yes, but while Carolyn gets her, if you could take your slides off and Carolyn could add hers up. Todd from New York does have a question in the chat. What is typical megawatt size of Arcturus and what voltage is needed to operate? If you could answer that quickly.
Yeah, those are great questions. So this system is a good fit for large manufacturing facilities that consume a lot of steam. So sort of minimum size is around 3 megawatts electrical. And it'll go up to 20, 30 megawatts electrical, and that produces approximately kind of minimum 7 or 8 megawatts thermal, and it'll go up to 70, 80 megawatts thermal. So those are the general ranges. So that's a fit for big plants. It's not a fit for small plants.
Okay, thank you. And we'll have other questions after Carolyn has her presentation.
I was just going to add the voltages, so we're actually pretty voltage flexible. So we're able to operate off of medium and high voltages, and we engineer the system to meet whatever voltage is available on site.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn, you're up to bat.
Great, thank you. Do y'all see the screen and you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, fantastic. Well, the benefit of going second is that we did a lot of groundwork in the first presentation. So, at risk of being repetitive, this is the reason why at Rondo we got started. We are a thermal battery manufacturer. Of course, industrial heat here is, we said 25%, but there's a squiggly, so 2025 is probably the right numbers in terms of global energy emissions that are dedicated to industrial heat. And when we got started, really the goal was, how do you tackle the problem that we've typically had with renewables in that they're intermittent? So the concept from the very get-go was industrial customers need heat 24/7. In order to replace that, how do you take intermittent, low-cost renewable energy sources, charge a Rondo Heat Battery or thermal battery, as Rod mentioned, there are several other thermal battery manufacturers out there, and turn that into 24/7 industrial heat, typically steam for industrial customers. And really the goal was to use a lot of proven technologies. And the path to getting the Rondo Heat Battery, as we call it, has been something that we've been working very closely on with a lot of industrials. So this is just a list of our investors, but really the core purpose from the very beginning was to work with some of the world's largest chemicals, fuels, mining, tech companies in order to make sure that we are making a solution that really addresses their industrial heat needs. This is the Rondo Heat Battery. It's wonderfully anti-climactic in some ways because this box that you see here is what we affectionately call the Rondo Heat Battery. And if you were to look inside this box, what you would see is a stack of bricks made out of refractory material that get very hot. We affectionately call it putting bricks into a toaster oven. So you can imagine when it comes to the core technology, it is a stack of bricks that get very hot, so up to 1100 degrees Celsius, that are being charged by wires not very different from what you see in your toaster oven, just a lot thicker. And if you were to imagine those wires connected to an electricity supply source, they would get very hot, they would radiate heat. And then using that radiation, we're able to get what is a lot of bricks inside this little box, very, very hot. And in order to extract that heat, we essentially blow air through the bottom of the stack. The air will get hot as it rises. Then we put it through a heat exchanger as it's extracted, and typically we're delivering steam. Some customers do want hot water, hot air, but typically the base configuration is a steam one. And this is actually a picture taken from a Rondo Heat Battery unit installed at Calgren Ethanol facility in California. Of course, if you think about the actual industrial customers that we are speaking with, it is a whole range of customers from fuel producers to chemicals producers, food and bev producers, anyone who really needs industrial heat. And I think the question that was on the chat was a very good one in terms of how big are you talking about here? The reality is that, for instance, we've been doing a lot more work in California modeling the impacts of heat batteries on the grid. The baseload industrial heat requirement in California is over 20 gigawatts. That is a massive amount of energy that is required to power the industrial base in California. For context, the gigawatt installed capacity for electricity generation purposes in California is around 50 gigawatts. We're talking to deliver industrial heat in an electrified fashion, you're looking at additional 20 gigawatts. What we're able to provide really is a storage solution that could enable the integration of more flexible loads. I'll get to that a little bit more later, but this is a schematic that shows you how we operate. So we are connected to either a dedicated renewable energy project or to the grid. This is very much, as you could probably imagine, shaped by the existing energy regulations that are in place. And then we're able to rapidly charge the Rondo Heat Battery. The Rondo Heat Battery can be charged in, say, 6 to 8 hours. And then we're able to, in that way, charge from the cheapest hours on the grid, assuming that you have exposure to those market prices. And it doesn't have to be continuous hours. In California, you will typically see continuous hours, of course, because of the solar profile in California. But we have also looked at wind territories when it wouldn't necessarily be 6 to 8 continuous hours. So we're able to rapidly turn on and off and charge within a few hours every single day, and then convert that into heat that we are then able to deliver 24/7 to an industrial customer. The efficiency is a really important one here, as in we are 98% efficient. So every day, if you put in 100 units of energy, we will be able to get 98 units of energy out in the form of heat. And of course, this is because what the industrial customer is looking for is heat, is not electricity. And as a result, any energy loss associated with this efficiency really is any heat that is escaping from outside that box that you saw here. So a lot of work was put into making sure it has good insulation to minimize that heat loss that is escaping from the box. You're most welcome to visit. As I mentioned, it's wonderfully anticlimactic. You will land at an airport, drive 4 hours, potentially more, to go to an industrial facility where you'll see a Rondo Heat Battery, and you could touch it. It is not hot because it is efficient. It doesn't make any noise. And we, from the very beginning, designed it to be as least disruptive as possible to an industrial customer. So in this particular case, the industrial plant had no downtime associated with our bringing the system online. As I mentioned, the scale that we're talking about is quite large. So our two basic units are an RHB 100 or an RHB 300. we're not particularly creative. These are proxies for storage capacity. So around 100 megawatt hours of storage capacity or 300 megawatt hours of storage capacity. And the goal here is to charge quickly. So you imagine we could charge at 20 megawatts for a Rondo Heat Battery 100 and then put out 7 megawatts. Those are max charge and discharge rates. And the goal is to then deliver a 24/7 heat solution to an industrial customer. As Skyven mentioned, we also have two different models. We have a general CapEx purchase type model when a customer, a large industrial, will say we will just purchase the Rondo Heat Battery. But I'd say another good group of our customers are looking for a financed solution. So similar to how they pay for natural gas on an ongoing basis, they're looking for, say, a way to pay for heat on an ongoing basis, even if it's requiring the capital investment of Rondo Heat Battery. What that typically looks like is either a storage as a service or heat as a service. And in some ways, we think of the storage as a service one as a BYOE. So you bring your own electricity. This is much more common, as you could probably imagine, in Europe, where we're also active, where it's easier for customers to procure their own electricity. In fact, in some places in Europe, we've been told that you could even get a 10-year hedge for the 6 cheapest power prices every single day to charge a Rondo Heat Battery. In those scenarios, we're looking at a storage as a service type model when a customer will pay monthly fees to pay for the cost of the right to use and operate the Rondo Heat Battery, and they will procure their own electricity. In the heat as a service model, of course, it's more full wrap, as in we are also including and securing the electricity supply ourselves, and then in that way are able to deliver a contract to a customer who's paying on a $1 per megawatt hour thermal delivered basis. I think, though, what would be helpful, and I'm happy to answer any questions on the technology as well, is really to zoom out a little bit and really think through some of the broader implications of thermal batteries, which is what we've been increasingly doing more of these days. And one is, of course, an economic development story. And of course, the DOE has been very involved on this aspect. And thermal batteries, so as Rod mentioned, there are maybe a dozen or 24 active thermal battery manufacturers out there. And by thermal batteries, I mean electricity in and heat out. That's how we're thinking of thermal batteries. And in that sense, thermal batteries have gotten a lot of support recently with big industrials integrations. So you can imagine Kraft Heinz, Diageo, Ashland, and Eastman. These are all examples of investments that have gone in order to spur the deployment of thermal batteries across the United States. It's funny because we have Diageo is a particularly exciting one because it's also there's 2 states involved, but one of their facilities is at their Bullet Bourbon facility, and we get a lot of inbound requests asking for site visits. And I always think all of our other sites are also very exciting as well, but that one was a particular crowd pleaser. But these are all integrations that us and other thermal battery manufacturers are looking at in terms of ensuring points of the scoreboard when it comes to showing the importance of thermal batteries, both for decarbonizing industry as well as some of the grid benefits insofar as it's connected to the grid that they're able to provide. And I think taking a pause here, something that has come increasingly more to our attention that we're starting to think more seriously about is how does dispatchable load, for instance, differ from demand response? Often when we speak with a lot of stakeholders, they immediately put us into the demand response bucket. But I think fundamentally what we are proposing here is something different, as in demand response, at least in our experience, is something that you use in, say, 10 emergency hours or 10 emergency events in a year. It's really intended to curtail power consumption demand in emergency situations. Dispatchable thermal batteries and dispatchable loads are, I think, in many ways, what we are increasingly thinking about when we're talking about the need for flexible loads. As in, these are a new type of asset, when you could, if you wanted to, as a grid operator, for instance, decide the 6 to 8 hours that you would actually want to charge a thermal battery. And it's not intended to be an emergency response type of technology. This is intended to build in base load flexibility into your system. And it doesn't necessarily impinge on the industrial abilities, the ability to actually produce whatever valuable good that they're producing. With the Rondo Heat Battery, it's designed such that it can be fully dispatchable. A grid operator will be able to decide which 6 to 8 hours that they would like to charge the Rondo Heat Battery. And then using that power, then the Rondo Heat Battery will be able to deliver 24/7 heat to an industrial customer. Someone affectionately called us bottom feeders. I'm sure there's a much better way, an affectionate way to address what we are trying to do here. But really the goal is to take the valley hours that are least valuable to the grid when the grid is least constrained, as opposed to curtailing demand during those peak hours. So in that way, it's a fundamentally different type of asset that we're thinking about. And of course, what this practically means is that for this new class of fully dispatchable resources, of which thermal batteries are one, it means that you could add and increase the utilization of this existing system assets without adding to peak load, because it's very much designed to only pull power in non-peak hours. And the ability to have quick response times, as I mentioned, thermal batteries they have different underlying technologies, but in our case, it is a wire that is no different than what you see in a toaster oven, as in you could turn it on and off. We're able to also provide ancillary services. And I think the scale is not something we could understate. Again, in California, it's 20 gigawatts of baseload industrial heat demand. And it's not just unique to California. Across the United States, when we're talking about industrial customers, often we're talking about around a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 ratio between their heat demand and their power demand. So the scale of it makes it an incredible opportunity if we're able to integrate it the right way for it to be a very flexible asset that could be used by grid operators and utilities, very much who are currently focused on meeting increasing demand requests and also ensuring reliability. And of course, depending on the market, and I mentioned Europe is quite different. In Europe, we could actually set prices and participate in wholesale markets, right? That's not necessarily something that you could do across the United States or in many places in the US. And that's something that we are increasingly thinking more about, and which will be critical for this whole class of assets that can be responsive to price signals in a very rapid way. So I think that's it for the prepared materials, and happy to answer any questions that you might have on both the technology as well as some of the broader grid benefits.
Thank you, Carolyn. That's wonderful. Both presentations are excellent, and I invite the working group to chime in with questions. But I'll start with a couple, and I think this is for Arun. We understand, or so we're told, that industrial heat pumps are more widely used in Europe than here. I don't know if any of them are steam generating or not, but for industrial heating, and that's still kind of a new or not unusual thing here. Do you have an inkling as to why that is so, and what we can do about it to make the heat pumps more widely used in American industry?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So first of all, it is true that that heat pumps have greater adoption in Europe. Steam generating heat pumps in particular are a cutting edge technology. So they are new in Europe and in the United States. It's not like they're everywhere in Europe and not anywhere in the United States. It's not like that. They're cutting edge technology. So there are a few examples that have been deployed in Europe. It's a small handful, and to our knowledge, there are no examples that have been deployed in the US. So still, there is a little bit more in Europe, but it's not like night and day. And then for the lower temperature heat pumps, which are like hot water heating heat pumps, those are significantly, more adopted in Europe. And so reasons for that are, have to do first with, general attention and interest, public as well as government and policy focus on decarbonization is stronger in Europe than it is in the United States, and that has an effect as to what an industrial customer will prioritize. And then energy prices do also play, into this equation. America generally has the lowest natural gas prices in the world, and those natural gas prices are lower than they are in Europe, and that kind of makes it a little bit more difficult for us to electrify here in the United States. So those are some high level kind of general attitude, policy, and then economics are the biggest drivers. And there's some related to that general attitude. There's also some education about in Europe, industrials are generally more familiar with heat pump technology and are generally looking at it more than they are here in the US.
Okay, great. So this is initially for Carolyn, but I think it's applicable to Skyven as well, and that is your systems are pretty big. They use a lot of juice, and as you described, they can be used to provide grid services and alleviate some of the pressures of electrification. However, they are pretty big. You don't just go into the local industrial park and plug in. So could you tell us a bit more about coordination with utilities, what may be needed? Are you connecting directly with transmission, or is it through the distribution grid? A little bit about what a customer needs to do and what services you provide versus a customer and coordinating with the utility.
Great question. We work very closely with the customer in figuring out how to physically connect to the grid when we are connecting to the grid. What that means is participation in meetings with utilities as well as grid operators, depending on the jurisdiction. Typically, at the size that we are talking about, we're looking at transmission connected resources. Sometimes it could be distribution for an RHP 100, but often you're looking at transmission connected resources. And we'll definitely go hand in hand with the customer in a lot of these conversations. And depending on the geography, some geographies and jurisdictions really understand the value of these flexible resources. And as a result, there is, I think, a lot more fruitful conversations when it comes to either structuring, for instance, bespoke tariffs that really are more cost reflective, or in the case of deregulated markets, that's not something that you would necessarily encounter. But it's definitely something that we work very closely with our customers on and ensuring.
Okay, great.
All same for Skyven. We tend to drive those conversations. So in addition to participating in them, we actually tend to drive them just because our customers tend not to have the extra bandwidth to really get into these deep conversations. So we drive them. And then the other thing, to alleviate this issue is the coefficient of performance on our technology essentially serves to reduce our electricity consumption by a factor of average factor of 3. So to produce the same amount of steam, our technology consumes 3 times less electricity, which just has the benefit of needing less power, less juice.
Okay. Next question coming up is more of a technical one about both your systems. Do you have to customize it for the customer's steam and heat needs, or is it sort of tunable? So, Arun, the Skyven heat pump, is it essentially the same unit that goes into a dairy manufacturer in New York versus a higher temperature chemical facility in Texas? Do you tune it for the pressure and temperature required by the customer?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because it's been a core focus of innovation here at Skyven. So historically, projects have been completely bespoke, designed for the manufacturing facilities requirements from the ground up. And what we've figured out how to do at Skyven is generate a set of standardized building blocks. So our technology consists of approximately 20 different building blocks. Each building block is standardized. And in order to create a system specifically for a dairy manufacturer, we pick a certain combination of those 20 building blocks that produces steam at the temperatures and flow rates needed by that dairy manufacturer. And then you say you've got a giant high temperature chemicals plant. They need a different combination of those building blocks. but the building blocks are always the same and are actually, if you have building block A in each facility, the building blocks themselves are interchangeable.
Okay. More complicated than IKEA.
We definitely say that the core technology is the same. The bricks, the wires, that is all the same. To your point as to is there any sort of customization, those are tunable aspects in terms of the actual heat that is required, say from the boiler on the output, depending on the customer. But those are tunable, not changing the actual modular nature of the unit.
Okay. Question from Todd in the chat. Todd, did you want to speak aloud or just have it read off? Okay, we'll just say, so the question, I guess, is for both of you, how and where are your systems manufactured?
So our systems manufactured here in the US. So those standardized building blocks that I mentioned are manufactured here in the US, and then we put the building blocks together on site. And so there's local assembly and construction that goes on, which is great because it gives us an opportunity to provide local jobs and develop out the local workforce. So yeah, Carolyn.
I'd say an important thing to note here is our systems are manufactured on site. And the reason for this is because the masses that we're talking about simply do not fit on the back of a truck. It's a little hard to see in the picture that I flashed on the screen earlier because maybe we should have put a human there for perspective. But if you think about our bricks, roughly say the bricks each weigh half a ton. And in an RHB 100, you're thinking about hundreds of these bricks. So all the subcomponents are brought to the site, and then all of this is manufactured on site, similar to how, say, an offshore wind vessel would also be manufactured on site.
So it's really assembled on site, but you're still buying the heating elements from somewhere and putting it together, or the refractory. And also
Yeah.
Todd adds to his question, which states for anything that is domestically produced.
It's a little bit more involved than assembly, actually much more involved than assembly. You're most welcome to come visit us. Putting the system together is no small feat, and we have all these custom tools and an entire fleet of folks who know how to manufacture on site. But I think in terms of what states, you're most welcome to come visit us in Alameda. We do have a facility out in our Alameda where we have wire bending facilities. Because everything had to be made from scratch. So even the wires that are going in, yes, it's similar to what you see in a toaster oven. They also weigh more than probably I do. So these were all custom designed wires using custom tooling. And you're most welcome to come visit us out in California.
Thank you. And Arun, the domestically manufactured components, the question about states.
Yeah, so we have manufacturing presence in California, and have gotten a lot of support from the California Energy Commission to develop out that manufacturing presence. And because our systems are also large, each building block does fit on a truck, but like you can't put all the building blocks on one truck. And so we are also investigating the development of manufacturing so we don't have to do massive cross-country shipping.
Okay. Yeah, our members include economic development kind of folks. So the interest is not only in your technologies supporting manufacturing industry in their states, but also, the opportunity to be part of the supply chain as well. So
Understand.
yeah. So a business-oriented question, you both offer as a service approaches with interesting twists, I'll say. And so do you have contingencies in case the host or the customer operates at a lower rate than you might have penciled out in making the agreement? So, the chemical manufacturer, the dairy or whoever reduces its production, it reduces shifts, or it closes some of its lines seasonally, or worst case, it shuts down. Who holds the bag when that happens?
Yeah, I can go first on that one. So we work hard to structure our energy as a service contracts to share risk between us and the manufacturing facility. So we do not want the manufacturing facility to be left holding the bag solely, but we also don't. It also not a good business arrangement for us to be left solely holding the bag. So we do careful construction of agreements to share risks, including risks of operational schedules changing at the manufacturing facility.
I think there's two important questions there. One is just in terms of their actual operating heat demand fluctuating, and another one is more in terms of maybe even underwriting to that customer. If you're talking about a 20-year contracts, what happens if they go under in 10 years, for instance, right? And I think it is important to note when we're talking about industrial customers, there's a really long tail. There's definitely the big industrial names that everyone is very familiar with here who have very strong balance sheets, but there's definitely a long tail of industrial customers who might be mom and pop industries who have very, very slim margins and not great balance sheets. I think to the first one about the more on an ongoing operating basis, I think that's something you could definitely structure around and something that we work with very closely with our financing parties on. Often, if you think about a large industrial site, we are only a tiny smidgen of their actual heat load. So this is really when we're thinking about strategy, we're decarbonizing their site in phases, even with an RHB 100 or an RHB 300. And that means that in the first phases that we're most concerned about right now, in those first phases, it's structured more like a take or pay, or it's structured like a monthly payment that in which they make regardless of how much they use the system, because they will be controlling the operations. The second question in terms of if you're thinking on 10 or 20-year time horizons, I think that's a very important one. And that's, my day job is leading our project financing efforts. It's working closely with investors who do have the ability to underwrite to different customers and working very closely with them to make sure that we are very much closely aligned in the type of customers that we are engaging with. So it's probably no coincidence that the customers that were on the screen and the ones that we have now publicly announced we're working with Europe are large industrials, because those were the ones that were easiest when you're already introducing a new technology, perceived risk. And I think perceived risk and risk are two different things, but perceived risk, it's important to focus on that as opposed to introducing other risks as well. So far we've been very focused on making sure that it's a take or pay or some sort of monthly payment that is agnostic to actual operation, and making sure in the first phases that's possible because we're such a small portion of their actual heat load. And then also on the longer term horizon, making sure we're underwriting properly with the people who know actually how to do that.
Okay, great. Question on technology, another one that's more technology oriented. For your technologies or related technologies, are there still R&D needs? And are you engaging in R&D, or do you expect Department of Energy or others to engage in the R&D? What are sort of the R&D challenges, or RD&D if you want to extend it to demonstration?
Well, in industrial heat pumps, so industrial heat pumps are a cutting edge technology. And so in being a cutting edge technology, there is an opportunity to continue to develop the technology, push the boundaries of both performance and cost reduction. And I think there's probably more room for cost reduction than there is for performance increase, just because the performance of our particular heat pump is starts to approach the thermodynamic limits, where the laws of nature don't really allow you to do a lot better than we're able to do. But there is room to reduce cost, and so we at Skyven do have ongoing R&D to reduce cost over time, like you would see in any cutting edge technology.
We have a whole R&D team out in California, and I think the focus is definitely on cost reduction as well. I think an important one too is making sure that we're designing the system so that it actually meets the market needs. For instance, the 628 charging, rapid charging was not by coincidence, is because that's how we perceived it in California if you're thinking about a solar day. If you're seeing more market dynamics, for instance, in Europe, that suggested that it would be more valuable to charge in 2 or 3 or 4 hours, that's going to be a different stream of development when it comes to designing a product that could meet those needs. So I think there's going to be an ongoing R&D effort, both on the, of course, on the cost side, but also in terms of making sure we're developing a product that is meeting the market needs as the market develops as well.
Okay, great. Forgot to ask the nerdy heat pump question of what is the working fluid?
Yeah, it's a it's a good question. It's an important one. Our working fluid at Skyven for Arcturus is water. There is no other refrigerant. Of course, so we're a bit unique in the heat pump industry in that most heat pumps use refrigerants that range from HFOs to ammonia to propane or butane. All of those refrigerants, in our view, have significant risks, and so it's one of the main driving reasons why we use water as a refrigerant.
Okay, great. And what is, for both of you, what is your sort of policy and regulatory wish list and rolling out more subsidies? Other than give us more money or give our customers more money, what would be sort of your policy and regulatory wish list? Let's start with Carolyn, unless you're still cogitating on that.
That's a great question. I think if you think about what's number one on our regulatory wish list, it's somehow getting access to wholesale market prices outside of ERCOT. And I think it could either work with either direct access to wholesale market prices or the development of tariffs that are actually cost reflective. Because the reality is that if you're stuck on an industrial tariff that includes a lot of costs that we are not necessarily causing with a flexible load, for instance, we're not adding to peaker requirements, we're also not pulling on transmission or distribution lines when the grids are actually constrained. Those are going to be critical for creating a pathway for thermal battery development and industrial decarb in the United States. We see that a lot in Europe. An announcement we made publicly recently was the financing of 3 projects with the European Investment Bank, European Commission, and Breakthrough Energy Catalyst. And those were in 3 European countries. And it's no coincidence that the pipeline is very much blossoming in Europe. And it's because there is this wholesale market access that we speak to. As Rue mentioned, the cost of natural gas in this country is quite low. And the reality is that no plant operator will be really engaged with us meaningfully unless we're able to provide important cost savings as opposed to natural gas. And the only way really to do that will be able to have cost reflective tariffs or direct access to wholesale market prices. And our ability to do that will very much shape industrial decarb in this country, not just for thermal batteries, but any sort of industrial decarb pathway that relies on electrification.
Arun?
Well said. I completely agree with everything Carolyn just said. But if I were to add another one, some sort of this is, you're going to hear this from anyone working on decarbonization, but some sort of impact for carbon emissions, and the way we like to see it, though, our favorite implementation of that is a program that essentially charges customers or charges carbon emitters, uses the funds generated by that kind of program in order to fund incentives to reduce emissions. So it ends up being both a carrot and a stick in a single program, and it is self-funding. We like that implementation.
Okay. I think comporting with Carolyn's point about causation, I'd imagine both of you would agree that conventional demand charges are not useful unless they are grid coincident, that your highest 15 minutes of usage is probably a bad thing if you to charge the speaking of monetary charge rather than the electrical charge, to charge people for their highest 15 minutes use if it's during an off-peak or a renewables curtailment period. So coincident charges would make more sense.
That's absolutely right. Demand charges wouldn't really make sense for us, especially because we were designed to actually increase demand in certain times, and ideally, and by design, only pull power in times when it's least valuable to the grid. I think that's exactly something that we have been struggling with in some parts of the US when you're hit with a large demand charge, for instance.
Okay. And our members have been kind of quiet, so give them another chance to chime in. Any of you have questions out there? Maybe they will come up afterwards, so we may bother you later on. So, any last words from either of you? Not in an ultimate sense, just for the webinar.
Thank you for having us. It really means a lot for the interest here, because I think we really can't do this alone. We have to do it with a lot of folks who've been thinking much more deeply about the energy space as a whole. Because I think if we are trying to solve industrial decarb and also think more about the importance of flexible loads, these are conversations that we should be having.
Yeah, I agree. Really appreciate the time and appreciate the engagement. Like we firmly believe that state level engagement is going to be critical to decarbonizing and really improving the competitiveness of industry in here in America. So thank you.
Great. So, and I will request that you keep us at NASEO in mind if you need, and our member state and territorial energy offices. Don't be afraid to contact them when you are looking to work in their states, and let us know if we can give you a hand on that.
Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate this. We will be, for everyone else, we will be posting the slides and the recording this time. And we do ask the working group to give us some thoughts about future forums as well. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Arun. We're very grateful, and we wish you all the best. But we also wish your competitors the best, because we want to solve decarbonization and do all kinds of good stuff.
The pie is big enough for all of us, so that will be great. Thank you, Ross.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.